Welcome to another DragonLance Saga Order of Aesthetics news episode. It is Bakukul Frost Cult the 19th. My name is Adam, and today I've been sifting through the Icon of Chronos, and I ran across some interesting news. I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga YouTube members and Patreon patrons, and invite you to consider becoming a member or patron by visiting the link in the description below. You can even pick up Dragonlance Media using my affiliate links. Now, there's a couple things I wanted to hit right off the bat before I dive into the actual show. There's a DL Saga anthology, not a Dragonlance anthology, a DL Saga anthology. It's important to be clear about that, because while Dragonlance is a trademarked title and reference, a DL Saga anthology is not. So it's more of like fans doing fan fiction in the DL Saga world, not the Dragonlance world. See the difference? All right. So in any case, I'm accepting proposals to submit or submissions, and I will get back to everyone on, I think it's like March 1st is the date I put out there, on whether or not their piece has been accepted into the anthology. But it's not going to be, of course, released until after I have all of the stories. So I kind of have to wait to see if I can even, one, get enough stories. Like, I'm writing one myself, but that's the only one that I know will be done. So if you're an author, if you like to write fan fiction, if you just want to share a really fun fantasy story that's set in that shared setting that we love, but it's not overtly stated, then reach out, info@dlsaga.com, or you can visit this website right here, which is dlsaga.com/contributor. And it has all the information that you need for what I'm looking for as far as the story information. And then, of course, if you want to submit a synopsis or an idea that you want to submit to let me know that you're working on it so I can save space for you, this is the form in which you would want to do that, or you can always just email me directly. That's fine too. And then there's a submission frequently asked questions at the very end. So check it out. It's something that I'm very excited to be putting together. I've produced books myself before, so, you know, both personally and professionally. So this isn't like a new thing for me. Ultimately, it'll be physical copy, it'll be a digital ebook, and it'll be like a digital PDF. So I'll have all the different versions for however you want to receive it. And then, of course, all authors will be getting a printed and digital version of the book for their short story submission. Because this is a first attempt in DL Saga, I don't know if it is going to have any returns at all. And so I don't want to make any promises. I'm already going to be going into the hole because I'm going to be commissioning artwork for the cover, very much like the amazing fantasy artwork we see in our shared favorite campaign setting. So that's something that's going to happen. So if you're into it, if you want to contribute, if you want to be a part of this history, let me know. All right. Corey, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Dan Brown, what up? Awesome. All right. Well, I'm hoping you guys enjoy it. Okay. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about really briefly before I dive into the show is that I wanted to remind you that members of the YouTube channel, so not subscribers, but if you're paid members, and the paid side of it is like 99 cents a month starting. So paid members and Patreon patrons, you get weekly readings from me for free. So it's just something that is only for you. And then, of course, there's monthly downloads as well for all Patreon patrons, and then YouTube members of the Whitestone Council tier, which is the second high tier above the 99-cent level. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that there are benefits to membership, and, you know, there's a reason why membership has paid elements to it. And that's simply because I've got to pay for everything myself. You know, and you have to understand that not only does the software cost a significant amount of money to make this stuff using Adobe Creative Suite, but there's website hosting fees and URL fees and email fees. And then, of course, you have to deal with the storage fees for audio files. Now, I have audio files for every single project that I do on this channel. So if you want to tune into Apple Podcasts or Amazon Music or wherever you get your Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, there's a DL Saga podcast right there with all this content in it as well. So wherever you want to get DL Saga content, you can. And all of that takes time and effort and all that stuff. And that's why I have these paid tiers and Patreon channels and stuff. So anyway, Discord is also a thing. If you are interested in using Discord, if you like to communicate through Discord, DL Saga has a Discord. So definitely, check that out if and when you're interested. Of course, all links you can get right on the website. If you look at the bottom of the website, dlsaga.com, you can see every link to everything that I have here. But then also, just on the sidebar, you can connect with all sorts of information. You want to sign up to the email list to get emailed and notified every once in a while of new and upcoming things. Well, then this is where you'd go to sign up for that. So just remember, there is a purpose to the website other than just reposting YouTube videos, for example. All right, so let's dive into today's news episode with this first article, Mother of Dragonlance. Now, this was just released on showme.missouri.edu, so you can already tell the direction that the interview is going to go. But this is the most recent interview that just came out. Oh, where's the date? On the 17th, so today's the 19th, of course. So 2 days ago. Mother of Dragonlance, from a barn in Wisconsin, Margaret Weis spins tales of quests, friendship, and the occasional dragon. They have reshaped the landscape of modern fantasy. And of course, this is a really nice little piece of artwork from Steve Tabut. Go to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and head south about 40 miles. You'll arrive at a resort town called Lake Geneva. Somewhere on the outskirts is a converted barn that has stood for more than a century. Right at this very moment, author Margaret Weis likely is sitting inside, furiously typing about the mystical adventures of the Salamnic knight Huma and wizard Magius. I write every day, she says. I have contracts, and I have 2 dogs to support, and I still love working with words. Weis, B.A. from 70, stands as one of the defining fantasy and science fiction voices of the past half-century, a writer whose invented world of Krynn has become bedrock for generations of Dungeons & Dragons players, shaping their own adventures. A New York Times best-selling author well into her 5th decade of writing, she's penned so many stories and trilogies that she freely admits she has no idea how many books feature her name. The answer is 65, if you believe Wikipedia. She doesn't even have the space in her office to store them all. I run out of room, so I keep giving them away, she says. I only have my research. Most famously, Weis is one of the original creators of the DragonLance Saga. Fan conventions and internet forums run down all the details of this magical, forgotten realm. That's an interesting twist of phrase. But here's the bottom line. In the 4 decades since its first edition, the DragonLance series has collectively sold more than 25 million copies and has been translated into multiple languages. The numbers hardly tell the whole story, though. Just look at Reddit, a crucial online hub for fandom. If I had not read those books when I was a young kid, my life would have been so much different, wrote one reader on a DragonLance thread. One of those few things that I can point to and say, this is truly life-changing. Weis and co-author Tracy Hickman returned to the fold a few years ago with a new trilogy, Dragonlance Destinies, out in paperback. During a recent call, she was in the revision stage on the first book of another new Dragonlance series, War Wizard, featuring a very famous wizard in the Dragonlance lore called Aegis. Really? Really? Aegis? You already mentioned Magius before, and you completely had this massive typo that no one caught? On an EDU website? Come on. Called Magius and his friend, who was a Knight of Salamnia, she says. It will be published in August. In a fantastical, ever-expanding lore filled with sorcerers, dwarves, bards, wizards, witches, and dragons, Weis is the very real queen. Among her loyal subjects, or fans, is actor, writer, and host Joe Manganiello. Best known for roles in Magic Mike, True Blood, and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, the actor is a D&D diehard and franchise entertainment consultant who first met Weis in 2018. They were both at a meeting to map out the relaunch of the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons Dragonlance of the Shadow Queen. What? The actor is a diehard entertainment consultant who first met Weis in 2018. They were both at a meeting to map out the relaunch of the 5th edition of Shadow of the Dragon Queen in 2018? I thought she said she didn't have anything to do with that. That's interesting because, she's posted straight up on X that she had nothing to do with Dragonlance Saga of the Dragon Queen, and she was never even asked about it. Same with Tracy Hickman. And yet right here, they're claiming that they were both meeting for the first time when they were relaunching the 5th edition of D&D Shadow of the Dragon Queen. That's interesting. Margaret is so funny and wily and mischievous in a hilarious way, and the juxtaposition of these multifaceted personality traits makes her a great writer. Manganiello writes via email, she's not afraid to let her thoughts and feelings out through these characters, which is why all her characters have such different voices. She's a pioneer who doesn't get the credit she deserves. Session 0. It never occurred to a young Weis to be a professional writer. Sure, the Independence, Missouri native had a passion for reading and writing. She committed to Mizzo because it offered a creative writing program. Nonetheless, she majored in art. Then one day, during her freshman year, a student teacher instructed her to stay after class. I thought I was in trouble, Weis says. Instead, the teacher gushed about her talent and suggested that she switches majors to literature and creative writing. I've often said it was like when John Belushi decides he's going to put the band together in Blues Brothers. She recalls, he looks up to the sky and the heavens opened. Being a student in the late 1960s had a profound impact. Never mind that the only protest she attended was to oppose the closing of a popular bar called the Huddle Club. Mizzo was where she discovered fantasy author J.R.R. Tolkien's books. In the days before the internet, students spread the word by hitchhiking, she said. Students would come from the West Coast bringing along copies of Lord of the Rings. Eventually, we saw it in bookstores and started reading it. The book's themes of resistance, anti-industrialism, and friendship across cultural divides came to symbolize the protests against the Vietnam War. Weis returned to Independence after graduation and, at her mother's urging, clocked in as a proofreader for the publishing arm of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What? I didn't know Weis was a proofreader for them. I knew that Tracy Hickman was a member, or is a member. She got married, had 2 kids, and ended up spending 11 years on the job. Then, in the immortal words of Belushi's Joliet Jake, she embarked on her mission from Gad. An article about an ascendant gaming company caught her eye as she perused Publisher Weekly in 1982. Tactical Studies Rule Inc., TSR, was formed in 1973 and first headquartered in a Wisconsin basement. Fueled by a growing interest in fantasy fiction, TSR's decade-old game Dungeons & Dragons had recently become a phenomenon. I thought, wow, that would be such a neat game for my kids and I to play, because it was completely based on the imagination, she said. A few months later, Weis spotted a job listing for TSR Games editor. She failed the interview pre-test miserably, but no matter. Gene Rabe, a TSR Books editor, was looking for someone to edit a series to dovetail with a new role-playing game module co-created by Hickman. It was titled Dragonlance. The editor found my application in the games department and contacted my agent, she says. I had lunch with her and was hired that day. She packed up her family and 2 cats and moved to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. As Weis immersed herself in the world, she and Hickman soon realized that the only people equipped to write these books were staring back at them in the mirror. Hickman, who had developed the Dragonlance setting with his wife Laura, kept designing the game while Weis, whose storytelling instincts meshed well with his world building, wrote the prologue and first 6 chapters in a single weekend. Jean told me years later that she only agreed to read our stuff because she didn't want to hurt our feelings, Weis said. Instead, Rabe ended up bowled over by the results and the Dragonlance Chronicles were born. The first volume, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, was published in November 1984 and became an instant New York Times bestseller. It was stunning, Weis said. I had never in my wildest dreams imagined this. Even her tough-to-please mother, who envisioned her becoming the next Joyce Carol Oates, came around to embrace the success. She bragged that she was the grandmother of one of the characters. As Weis penned more books through the decades and beyond, her legend grew. If you play D&D, especially in the 1980s, you would have definitely read her books, said Francis Huang, an education professor at Mizzou and a fan since his youth. She created this whole world where people could identify themselves with these mystical characters, and the dragons ruled in her books. That was the big thing, because who doesn't love dragons? Mangonel started poring over her novels in the mid-80s. I loved how the mythology was used to discuss topics of codependency, war, race, love, and loss, he writes, noting that she was a trailblazer as well. In a world oversaturated with one-dimensional girl boss archetypes in fantasy, Margaret introduced multi-layered female characters. People don't understand how ahead of her time this was back then. Weis, in turn, credits her readers for her longevity. They're the ones who put our books on the Times list and gave us the freedom to do more books, she says. Now it's been 40 years with them. It's been a wonderful ride. The next campaign. Occasionally, Weis does like to venture outside the barn. She and Hickman are frequent presences at the annual Gen Con, the largest tabletop gaming convention in North America. At the 2025 edition in Indianapolis, she hosted a Dragonlance celebration panel, signed books at the Penguin Random House booth, and spent hours greeting readers. It's just so much fun because I love to meet the fans, she says. She has yet to return to Mizzou since graduation, but not for lack of affection. My parents moved from Missouri, so I don't have ties there anymore and haven't been inclined to go back, she explains. I just want to keep the memories because they were really, really good. After her Lord of the Rings spiritual awakening, Weis stopped reading fantasy books. Now she loses herself in mystery and romance novels. She's just made her way through all of Rex Stout's works in chronological order. She still loves the classics of Charles Dickens and Jane Austen. Weis and her daughter Liz once wrote 2 paranormal romance books together, Warrior Angel and Rebel Angel, because we thought it would be fun. Liz is an investigator at J.P. Morgan. Weis's son David died years earlier. Although Mangonel has signed on to write and produce a Dragonlance live-action streaming service series based on the first 6 core books and scripted a pilot episode, the project was canceled in 2024. The actor says he still has the dream to bring them to life on the screen. Still, fans have reason to be optimistic about potential new action on Krynn. In October, Wizards of the Coast, the Hasbro-owned publisher behind Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering, revealed that Weis and Hickman are returning to the fold. This time, they'll join forces with Mangonello on new Dragonlance projects. The announcement, shared on social media by D&D head Dan Iob, with a wink toward amazing things ahead, sent fans into a frenzy over what could be the long-awaited revival of one of the game's most treasured realms. Weis welcomes the excitement, but isn't tempted to tackle a screenplay were there to be one. My talent doesn't lie in that direction, she says. Besides, she's got plenty of books yet to write. Not just because she has contracts and dogs, not even just because she has a passion for it. As she puts it, I just wouldn't know what to do with myself. So I think it is important to note that you can pick up the Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen and Warriors of Krynn set for like $50. But if you're not really into D&D 2014 edition, I wouldn't really bother with it. It's better just to play the older editions and the older modules that already exist. Or if you really want to, it's really easy to convert modules from one edition to another because there's not a huge difference between editions other than stripping or adding rules and stuff like that. So you can easily modify it yourself if you really wanted to. And I highly recommend that you play them in their original editions if the question ever arises. Justin, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Sith the Brick, what's up? You said it before. It is your fervent hope that with the publishing of new novels, the out-of-print novels will be republished as well. I highly doubt that will be the case, but I also agree that would be cool. All right, next up. Oh, so really quick. What do you guys think the collaboration is going to be between WotC, Weis, Hickman, and Mangonello? Do you think it's going to be novels? Do you think it's going to be an adventure? Do you think it's going to be an animated series? Do you think it's going to be a live action series? Do you think it's going to be new modules? Like, let me know in the comments. I'm interested to hear what you guys have as far as what you think is going to be happening. I think the reality is we're probably never going to know until it actually lands, and that's probably going to be next year when we start hearing rumors of it. But we already know that there's another trilogy coming set with Magius and Huma in the Third Dragon War. And we also know that they're re-releasing Legends next year as a collector's edition. So Dragonlance is still alive. And of course, the DL Saga Anthology is going to be coming out at the end of next year, hopefully. So us fans will keep it alive, if no other reason. And DL Nexus is releasing regular modules for 5th edition, 2024 edition. So if you like that edition, check out their stuff. And then, of course, with some of their recent stuff, their collaborations with Richard Knack, we're getting short stories in Dragonlance. Of course, it's with Knack's version of Kaz and Huma and stuff like that, which is not the now new canon version with Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. So again, it's more fan fiction at this point than it is actually Dragonlance Saga core content. But it was for a long time, so there's that. Whatever they do will be golden with Weis. I hope so. I really hope so. You think most likely the course will be an adaptation of a Dragonlance Destiny into a gaming module? I think you're probably right, Sithabrick. I think that is actually a really logical way of doing it. And that way they can reset the era with the games as well as the novels. All right, new Dragonlance, new Dungeons & Dragons alternative has a clear target. For years now, most Dungeons & Dragons alternatives have sold themselves on tone, setting, or accessibility. Some promise darker fantasy, others pitch themselves as simpler, faster, or more narrative forward. Draw Steel, MCDM Productions' tabletop RPG that launched this year, is doing something far more specific and far more deliberate. It is aiming directly at tactical players who love combat as a system to be explored, not merely endured between story beats. At a glance, Draw Steel treads familiar territory. It's heroic high fantasy. It uses grids. It has classes, ancestries, abilities, and monsters that feel adjacent to Dungeons & Dragons, Daggerheart, or Pathfinder. But once play begins, it becomes immediately clear that this is not simply a remix of 5e. Draw Still is built around a fundamentally different philosophy of combat pacing, player agency, and encounter design. Most of all, it knows exactly who that philosophy is for. Draw Steel reverses Dungeons & Dragons' resource economy on purpose. Combat resources in Dungeons & Dragons are front-loaded. Players begin the adventure day at their best, armed with spell slots, rage uses, superiority dice, focus points, or similar mechanics. Over time, those resources are depleted, and after some time, fights can often become less interesting as characters need to fall back on basic attacks. Draw Steel completely reworks that structure, preventing tabletop DMs from seething at players distracted by their phones. Instead of starting fights with a full tool belt, characters begin encounters with no combat resources. Instead, they build momentum over time. Both players and monsters generate resources as a fight unfolds, meaning the longer an encounter lasts, the more dramatic and explosive it becomes. Powerful abilities are not something you rush to deploy immediately. They're something you earn by staying engaged in the fight. Draw Steel keeps the long haul interesting. First of all, I knew nothing about this, Draw Steel or MCDM, but this sounds really interesting. That the options unfold as the combat continues. That's actually a really interesting way of doing it. Draw Steel keeps the long haul interesting. This design choice solves a common tactical problem almost by accident. In Draw Steel, long combats don't stagnate, they escalate. Players are encouraged to remain active, position carefully, and coordinate with party members, because every round increases the potential impact of what comes next. This causes a unique layer of day-long pacing at work. Successful fights or critical role-playing moments earn the party victory points. Victories allow players to begin later encounters with additional resources based on how many fights or challenges scenarios they have survived throughout the in-game day. As the day progresses, victories ramp up. However, hit points, stamina, steadily dwindle. Draw Steel creates a risk-reward tension where heroes become deadlier but more fragile, pushing groups to press their luck. That's interesting. I've never played this, but I actually kind of want to try it now. No missed turns, no dead air. In Draw Steel, attacks do not miss. There is no equivalent of swinging a sword, rolling poorly, and twiddling your thumbs until the next turn. Every attack deals at least some damage, with stronger outcomes scaling based on the roll. Likewise, the system avoids incapacitating tabletop Dungeons & Dragons combat conditions like stuns almost entirely. Turns are not skipped, so players are always participating. The frustration of losing a turn to bad luck, a common complaint in D20 systems, is intentionally engineered out of the experience. Instead of binary success or failure, Draw Steel uses a 3-tier resolution system. Most checks and attacks are resolved by rolling 2d10 plus modifiers, with outcomes broken down as follows. Tier 1, an attack might deal little damage. For ability checks or roleplay, this results in failure with a potential negative consequence. Tier 2, an average roll. You attack competently and success at the task at hand, though complete success may depend on difficulty and the discretion of the director. Tier 3, the best result on a die roll. An attack may result in high damage or a lasting effect, while role-playing might yield some extra benefits. Building a character in Draw Steel may be easier than in Dungeons & Dragons. One of the Draw Steel's most controversial choices, for some players at least, is how little room there is for what we know as build optimization in D&D. It is extremely difficult to make a bad character. Key stats are locked in at baseline values. There's no equivalent to dump stats, and class frameworks prevent major missteps. If you love squeezing power out of obscure feat chains, multi-classing, and hyper-specific synergies, Draw Steel may feel restrictive. The game is not interested in rewarding clever math during character creation. Instead, it shifts the optimizing challenge into play itself. The real ceiling is how well players coordinate abilities, manage positioning, and adapt to evolving encounters under pressure. Success is less about what you build on paper and more about how you perform as a unit once the dice start rolling. This is amazing to me. This sounds really, really good, and I really want to try it now. A different take on classes. The rules are relatively concise. Abilities are less wordy, and classes are built with comparable levels of complexity. An average Draw Steel character is more involved than a D&D 5e fighter, but nowhere near as intricate as a high-level wizard. Importantly, the complexity curve is narrow. This creates a consistent tactical experience across the table, where everyone is expected to engage with the system rather than letting one or two players carry the mechanical weight. Tactical depth beyond combat. Despite its clear combat focus, Draw Steel doesn't abandon TTRPG structure outside of battle. It includes defined systems for crafting, negotiation, downtime activities, and montage tests. It takes on structured skill challenges in D&D. These mechanics are designed to give non-combat skill mechanical weight without overshadowing the game's tactical core. Character backgrounds, complications, and careers also stand out. Draw Steel puts real effort into justifying how tabletop heroes can come from walks of life not traditionally associated with adventuring. Aristocrats, artisans, and beggars are given inciting incidents and guiding questions that make their journeys feel intentional rather than incidental. I could definitely see a Dragonlance campaign in this. Draw Steel knows exactly who it's for. With its successful expansion funded already exceeding its expectations, Draw Steel has proved that there is a sizable audience hungry for more deliberate encounter-focused RPG. It offers a clear alternative for players who love tactical combat, dislike dead turns, and want encounters that grow more exciting the longer they last. Draw Steel doesn't ask what D&D should be, it asks what tactical players wish combat already was, and then builds a system around that answer. I think that's fantastic. All right, so have you guys played Draw Steel or MCDM? And if you have, does it fit nicely in with Dragonlance? Because it sounds like it would, especially during like a war era, like either the Summer of Chaos when the Knights of Takhisis are invading Ansalon, or in the War of the Lance, or even the Third Dragon War, or you could even go back to like the Second or First Dragon Wars and have like a full, almost elven-only based combat situation, which would be interesting to do a sort of one-off or a 3-session story arc based on. Anyone pick up Lego D&D set yet? Still need yours. You've built campaigns using Lego. I've never done that before. No idea. Although the potential of a video game done right is enticing. Oh yeah, for the Manganello thing with Weiss and Hickman, for sure. All right, so let me know what you think of MCDM Draw Steel. If this is something you've tried, let me know what you think about it. If not, would you watch or play in a one-shot? Interested to hear what you have to say? Leave a comment below. All right, this was for fun because I am a fan of Steve Jackson games. My favorite of all of their games is In Nomine, but I played a whole lot of GURPS when I was in the military and even after the military. And so I really enjoy playing GURPS as well. GURPS is I think it's like generic universal role-playing system, and you can just do anything in it. And it has source books for anything. So it's one of those where I'm going to be converting it, not even really converting it, but playing a Dragonlance game using GURPS as the system, just to showcase how malleable Dragonlance is as a setting to be played in any other system. And I'm also going to be doing the exact same thing with my own campaign setting, Direlands. So it should be pretty fun. Remember, Odic Spiced Potatoes, you should be able to blend in other campaigns. For sure. All right. It's Looney Tunes meets D&D when this classic TTRPG finally returns from hiatus. Get ready to be wacky, or wacko, as Toon, the iconic animated-inspired tabletop RPG from the 1980s, returns in all of its slapstick glory. If you stop to think about it, every Dungeons & Dragons player has had at one game in their life that felt like a cartoon. Slapstick is, perhaps unfortunately for many DMs, a common trope among goofier parties. This is extra hilarious in days when you got particularly bad rolls against relatively harmless situations. Of course, the consequences to these silly detours could prove fatal. If you want a TTRPG where slapstick violence and hijinks are encouraged, the upcoming Toon 2nd Edition is for you. Toon 2nd Edition, the cartoon role-playing game, is a revival of the quintessential cartoon TTRPG from 1984. Game designers Greg Kostikian and, you know what? He was instrumental in the Star Wars The Role-Playing Game from West End Games, TTRPG. It's pretty awesome that he's still doing this. And Warren Spector created the game to challenge themselves with genre nobody made game systems for. One of the biggest hurdles was the fact that kids' cartoon characters rarely ever died. This made Toon very different from the tabletop RPGs of the era. Toons could get hit by anvils, drink poison, blasted by cannon fodder, and be right as rain in a cutaway later. When designing the game, the prime directives were forget everything you know and act before you think. It's the perfect game for those who just want to do the stupidest plan possible because win or lose, it's guaranteed to be hilarious. The actual mechanics are simplified to encourage easy and enjoyable gameplay. Now look, I have I'll wait for it. It's almost over. Classic stats are replaced with muscle, zip, smarts, and chutzpah. They replace exactly what you think they replace. In lieu of feats, you get shticks. Such as Bugs Bunny's uncanny ability to disguise himself and become unrecognizable. Toon 2nd Edition promises more adventures, silly tables, new character creation, and updated arts for the 2020s. As for me, I'm just excited to run my long-anticipated Space Jam 3 campaign. Now look, I like the idea of this, and I've always said you can play Dragonlance in any setting. What if you used Toon as a Gully Dwarf-based campaign, or a Gnome-based campaign, or a Kender-based campaign? I mean, the whole trope of Dragonlance with Kender, Gully Dwarves, and Gnomes is that they're ridiculous. They're over the top and slapsticky. That's the whole thing. Now, it takes more of a gritty, realistic tone in D&D, and of course the way that the saga is unfolded, but I could easily see a Kender, Gully Dwarf, or Gnome campaign set in Toon so that it's just silly, slapsticky explosions everywhere and nonsense. And I really do think it would fit. And you could have the whole thing set in Mount Nevermind or Kenderhome or any Gully Dwarf sort of warren, you know? Any, what do they call it when they find their homes? This place. This place that they find for Gully Dwarves. And it would be super fun and funny. I'm going to do this. I'm 100% going to do this. And I'm going to play it on this this YouTube channel. And I think people are going to have a lot of fun. Not just playing it, but watching it. Because how could you not? I think it'd be great. So let me know. Did you ever play Toon First Edition with Steve Jackson Games? What do you think of Steve Jackson Games as a distributor of games and a producer of games? They have a lot of really great stuff. But would you like to watch or participate in a Toon-based Kender, Gully Dwarves, or Gnome one-shot? Let me know in the comments. Let's go on to the next one. And we're sticking with the cartoons. This was one of the Saturday morning cartoons that I grew up with that I absolutely loved. And it's probably because Mumra was scary as hell. He was one of those villains that, like, Skeletor was supposed to be scary, but he was always like, rah, 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 rah. You know, he's always sort of like slapsticky. Gargamel was slapsticky. Even Cobra Commander was kind of silly at times. But Mumra was a nightmare fuel bad guy in a cartoon world. And they used swords, and so it sort of fit in the whole almost fantasy D&D type trope that I always liked as a kid. So I was really, really invested into Thundercats as a young man. So let's read this article and see if this might be of any interest to anyone. Thundercats is finally getting a TTRPG, and it's a childhood dream come true. Thundercats, one of the most iconic cartoons of the 1980s, makes its way to the tabletop, and it's a heck of a nostalgia trip. Nothing says 1980s like the Dungeons & Dragons and Saturday morning cartoons, so much so that D&D got a beloved cartoon of its own alongside the likes of He-Man, Transformers, and of course, Thundercats Ho! While the D&D cartoon had purely isekai vibes, the other 80s fantasy cartoons of the time leaned even weirder. Thundercats, especially with its cast of runaway feline aliens, always stood out visually from the rest. In 2026, Lion-O and his party will join the tabletop scene with a brand new TTRPG. The Thundercats role-playing game is developed by Lynn Vader Studios and published by Dynamite Entertainment. The hardcover source book features 240 pages of lore, mechanics, and adventures in Third Earth that is sure to reignite the radical 80s child within you. Plus, the game was built with 2024 5e rules in mind, with original D&D classes, backgrounds, and adventures to boot. Now, that will rub a lot of people a certain kind of way. I also have some thoughts about the overwhelming dominance 5e has on the tabletop space. Still, given the sheer popularity of Thundercats, I'm hardly surprised at the choice. On that note, I am cautiously optimistic because the campaign never claimed to remain exclusive. A browse through the Kickstarter showed comments from the developers discussing plans for future systems. Hopefully that pushes through. What I personally love about the TTRPG most, however, is its stated goal to blend all of Thundercats' history into a seamless whole. My dad watched the 1985 iteration of Thundercats, while I ended up reading the comics and falling in love with the 2011 cartoon. Being able to take aspects from all Thundercats eras is what makes the sourcebook such a treasure trove for fans. Lastly, the Thundercat TTRPG is done and dusted. That means once the Kickstarter campaign concludes, it's off to the printers and ships as early as February 2026. Go off and shout thunder, 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 Thundercats Ho! In the Wargamer Discord. For other Forgotten Realms campaigns, check out these D&D books. All right, I'm curious as to this Kickstarter they're speaking of, so let's find it. This is it.
comic book. That was the other part of the time because we've moved there.
Interesting. All right. Well, look, I probably won't play this, but that's Mumra. I mean, that's when he's like screaming and stuff. He's all like jacked. But there's actually a version of Mumra where he's just like in these tattered, sort of mummy wrappings, just so scary. Awesome, just awesome. I think there is a Transformers TTRPG, to be honest. Every once in a while, I'll go check out drivethrurpg.com, and they have tons of IP TTRPGs there. I mean, tons of stuff that I never even knew existed. And it's really, really great. That's where I found the Army of Darkness TTRPG, and I ran a 3-episode campaign based on it. And it's, Evil Dead. It's awesome. Yeah. So, is this something that you guys would play, a Thundercats TTRPG? And what do you think about every IP getting its own version of a TTRPG? I mean, the reality is as long as there's a fandom for it, then hell, do it. Might as well. You'll make some cash. But ultimately, ideally, you would be doing it because the TTRPG space wants a game for that. And what they're doing here is just taking the skin of Thundercats and wrapping it around D&D 5e 2024 edition, which in my opinion is the worst version of D&D that you could have. But people love it. They absolutely love it. I mean, I'm running a campaign in it right now. So it's an easy bar of entry. And of course, Thundercats as an IP is beloved since the 80s, since I was a kid. So there's definitely a built-in audience for it. But I just don't know how much of that built-in audience who are now adults are really going to want to play a cartoon version of a game. And this is coming from me, who just said I was going to be doing a Toons campaign with the freaking Steve Jackson Games Toon 2nd edition game. So I don't know. I mean, they have a G.I. Joe and Transformers RPGs already. Ravenclaw says, thanks for tuning in, by the way. MTB, thanks for tuning in. So, I mean, why not add another to the pile? And ultimately, do people get these so they can play them? Or do they get them just because of nostalgia and they like the artwork? And I mean, to the publisher, it doesn't matter because they're still making money. But to everyone else, as far as like having legs, is it just throwaway? Let me know what you think in the comments. I would be interested to hear what you have to say. I think it's probably just another throwaway game. We have a lot of them, like the G.I. Joe and Transformers RPGs. And even the Army of Darkness one was throwaway because it never really went anywhere. But you can tell those types of stories regardless of having an IP version of a TTRPG. Just take your favorite game system and roll with it. And there's tons of universal basic role-playing systems that are very easy to fold in and use. And I mean, like one of my favorite TTRPGs of all time is In Nomine, and it can be used for all sorts of different types of games. And it's like, for me, my favorite sort of horror, like dark world author is Clive Barker. And his, of course, Pinhead universe, the whole Hellraiser franchise, I'm a massive fan of. But there's also tons of other stories that he puts out that are all sort of interwoven into that universe. And so there is this sort of Clive Barker, Harry D'Amour, Pinhead universe that, the sort of the books of the art, as it were, that you could easily do a whole campaign in. And I made an argument that In Nomine is the best TTRPG for that. But you could literally do it for anything. So Ninja Turtles, I invented my own with my young friends in middle school called Cross Genetics. And it was a version of because we loved Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at the time. It was, everything. The movies were out and everything. So we just created a role-playing game called Cross Genetics, where you could literally mix any animal and humanoid type thing together or multiple animals together and just we created a whole system around it. It was a lot of fun to play as a kid. But yeah, I mean, is that type of a game system best for just home brewing so that you get the passion directly? Or do you prefer doing this sort of nostalgia dump of a whole system like this? Let me know what you have to say. That is actually all of the notes that I wanted to bring up out of news. Clearly, we don't have a whole lot of Dragonlance news out there, and so I'm a little starved for that. But we do have Dungeons and Dragons news, and we do have TTRPG news, and so I'm sort of filling in with those in the interim and trying to skew it all around the idea of using Dragonlance as a campaign setting in these different settings, like systems to play in. And if that's something that you like to investigate, then I'm more than interested in that. Is that the Island of Dr. Moreau RPG? No, the one I'm talking about, it's about angels and demons. It's really pretty heavily Abrahamic based, mythology based, but it's spun out in a very, very interesting modern world setting way. It's very reminiscent of World of Darkness type games, but it uses a 3D6 666 game system, or 111 for the divine version of that. It's actually a really, really good one. Oh, no, I did not do the Island of Dr. Moreau one. The one I did was literally called Cross Genetics. But we were kids, and so it's not like we ever officially made it and released it or anything. It was just for us to play it at my buddy's house. So it was all just for fun. But anyway, that's it for this OA News episode. Have you tried Draw Steel? What do you think of Steve Jackson Games' games? And finally, what do you think of the next Dragonlance project, and what is it going to be? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. It goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. I hope you'll join in that celebration. Until next time, thank you for watching. My name is Adam with Dragonlance Saga. Slán Javar.